It took about 15 years from when I first thought I wanted to write a book. And the process was involved because the thing I wanted to write about was gender equality and how men's issues should be part of gender equality. And when I started thinking about that, what I realized was that I need to explain somehow. I need to explain why it is the case that we don't see that already. Why it is that we think we're doing equality when we are focused on women's issues and largely ignoring men's issues. Why does that feel like?
Let's just keep it as it is.
And so the book grew because I had to go into a whole bunch of psychology, social psychology issues. So I'm going to talk about just how to gentrify, which is part of my personal story and how I came to awareness of some of these issues. So I'll start with a story about a word that I invented. When I was a kid, I came across the word misled in a book. And not having met that word before, I made a wrong assumption. I thought that it must be the past tense of a verb to misel. So the word was misled. And for several years, I carried that word around in my head. And it felt right to me. It felt just the same as every other word. The fact that I never encountered that word in the present tense didn't tip me off because I wasn't looking to correct myself. I didn't think I had anything wrong. It felt right. So, anyway, my task here tonight is to unmisel us about gender. So I talked about it felt right to me. What does that mean? What do I mean by that? Because this is the heart of the issue of gender. What feels right to us. Think about a time when you were trying to remember the name of a friend. You've forgotten the name of a friend. You're trying to remember it. Somebody says, "Is it Jim?" No, it's not it. Is it Fred? No. Is it John? Yes. Yes, it's John. What's the difference? How do you know? How do you know? One of them feels right and the others feel wrong. You've got no evidence. You've just got a feeling. At some level you recognize that this one is right and this one is not. It's pure feeling. And yet it's completely compelling. You know you're right. There's no doubt at all. That's what I'm talking about when I talk about feeling. I'm not talking about emotion tonight. We often use feeling to refer to things like anger and sadness. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the feeling that tells us what is true and what is not true in the world. Now, these feelings can be mistaken, just like my feelings about the word misel. Imagine you're in a store, or in Ottawa, and you see somebody come out of the store, a good friend of yours. And you wave, and you say, "Hi, John." And he looks right at you, turns around and hurries off the other way. What do you think? Have I offended him? Is he mad at me? Maybe you're affronted. Maybe you're offended that he's ignored you. Then you go into the store. There's another friend in there that says, "Hey, just missed John. He had a cell phone call. His daughter was in an accident." It all falls into place. Whatever feelings you had, whatever upset you had, disappears as if it had never been. Because now you know what happened. It all makes sense. So now the feeling you have is aligned with reality. Before, maybe it wasn't. So these feelings about what's true are built on assumptions that we make about reality. They also are very strongly aligned with gender. And this goes back, I think, a long way. It goes back for generations, thousands of years. We've been shaped. You know, when I was at Nortel, there often used to be a time when a new mother, you know, an employee would bring her baby in for everybody to look at. And you know what would happen? All the women would get up, drop what they were doing, and go over and be fascinated by this baby, right? And the men, most of them, not all, but most of them, were not that interested. I wasn't. A bit older, you know, with a bit of personality, I'd be getting interested. A brand new baby. Now, what was going on to those people? Every woman that got up and went over and was fascinated by that, she didn't feel like she was being compelled by something in her from thousands of years ago that evolved so that women who were fascinated with babies were presumably better mothers, didn't drown them after they were born. That was put in us. But what I'm saying, what I'm pointing to here is we don't notice it. All the guys, me, the other guys who weren't that interested, we didn't feel like our behavior was being shaped. We didn't feel like, oh, I've got to sit here. I'm being forced by my conditioning. We don't experience it ourselves that way. But we are that way. There's no other explanation for the fact that this is gendered behavior. So how is this behavior playing out in society today? Another story. This happened in Ottawa a few years ago, quite a few years ago, at the Glebe Community Center. I was new into thinking about gender. My wife had left me a couple of years before, and I was trying to figure out my life, and so I went to something called the Ottawa Hall Men's Forum that met monthly. It was a place for men to come and talk about their lives. This particular evening, there were 3 women there, and that was unusual because normally it was just men. Anyway, the women had been invited to run the whole evening. And what they did was, they were actually from the Ottawa Rape Crisis Center. And they wanted us to have a debate. And the debate was, although not all men are violent against women, all men benefit from violence against women. So we were to debate this. I hadn't thought about it before, so I thought about it then. I thought about when my wife left me. She did it in a strange way. We didn't have any kids. She told me she was taking our dog to the vet. And she went off with the dog. And then she called me up and said, I've left you. I said, why did you do it that way? I was afraid you'd be violent. I've never been violent in my adult life. So my wife of 8 years didn't really know me. And I thought about that, and I thought, I sure didn't benefit from male violence against women in that situation, that my wife was afraid of me, and I didn't even know it. I couldn't think of any way that I could benefit. Anyway, so we started the debate. And the way it worked was that we were arbitrarily divided at first, and then we could cross the floor after we got debating to the side that we thought was right. I was already on the side that thought we didn't benefit, so I didn't need to cross the floor. But you know what? Some guys were crossing the other way. And I thought, that's amazing. I started really listening to what they were saying. They were saying things like, well, I benefit because I have more power in the relationship if my wife is scared of me. And I thought, wow, what kind of relationship are you in? Is that really a benefit? Is that something you want? Anyway, we ended up evenly split. And I thought, that's good. It's over. I've learned something. I didn't realize that some guys thought that way. But it wasn't over. Because the three women walked to the middle of the room and faced my group, guys who said that they didn't benefit from male violence against women. And they said, "You bastards, you are worse than the guys out beating their wives and the guys in the strip clubs and the guys using the prostitutes. You are worse than them because you are pretending to be growing into a new version of masculinity, to be developing yourselves, and all the time you're in denial of the benefits you're getting from the violent patriarchal system. You should be ashamed." Whoa. That was heavy. I was sitting there trembling, I'll tell you. That really shook me. And we tried to argue with these women. We tried to explain that we wanted to have equitable relationships. I remember one guy sitting there crying, saying, "I haven't seen my kids for 3 years because my ex-wife accused me of sexually molesting her." The women said, "A woman would never lie about something like that." So, pretty tense, and it didn't go anywhere. The women left, quite offended, that we didn't buckle down to them, and I left, and it played out this way. The women sent a letter to the organizers of the Ottawa Home Men's Forum complaining about how they'd been abused. The Ottawa Home Men's Forum organizers sent a formal apology by reply, and they renamed it to the Ottawa Home Men's Forum Against Sexism. And it didn't last a whole lot longer. It became a feminist organization. Now here's why this was significant, because this turned my life around. Why did it turn my life around? Because I saw something there. I saw that these three women were incredibly powerful. They were, first of all, they were running the whole event, the whole evening, and secondly, their shaming of us guys was devastating. They felt to me like rocks that we just pounded ourselves bloody against and made no progress at all. And yet, I also saw that they were sincere when they felt powerless. They felt abused. They weren't making it up. They really did. And so, I thought, this is bizarre. These women are simultaneously incredibly powerful and incredibly powerless. They're powerful, but they don't feel any of their power. They didn't feel it. And that is weird. You know, I spent a long time thinking about that. I wanted to understand it. So, a lot of things happened. I tell much more of this story in my chapter 5. 4 years later, I'm still thinking about it. Still trying to work it out. And I go to a workshop in Orangeville. It's a community building workshop. You have to pay money for this. There were about 2/3 of it were men, 1/3 women. And early in the process, one guy talked about how he had been doing badly, looking after his daughter, that he had not been able to reach out for help, and he had felt like he was doing a really poor job. And a woman in the workshop shamed him for that. Said, for not reaching out for help like she had reached out for help. And other people stopped her. Other people said, "No, don't do that. We're not going to let you shame him that way." And that was great. But later on, in a break, that woman came to me. I don't know why she chose me, but she chose me. She came to me and she said, "Tell me what happened there. Explain to me how come they stopped me from doing that when other things had happened, like one guy saying, when you said that, I felt like ripping your face off. We're not stopped. So I was getting close to the end of my process of figuring out what was all this thing about gender power. And I worked it out, talking to her. We were walking around the outside of the workshop space, and I worked it out. I said, shaming from a woman towards a man is huge. It's huge. But it's unrecognized how huge it is. You know, there's a cry that you've probably heard. Death before dishonor. It's a male cry. It's not a female cry. It's a male cry. Honor is important to men. And shaming is an attack on honor. And so I said to this woman, you know, we need to have 2 rules in workshops, all workshops. And I have had those 2 rules for all my workshops since. No violence, and that protects women's fears. And no shaming, and that protects men's fears. I was excited about that. I wasn't really paying attention to the woman, but anyway, that's what I told her. Anyway, you can guess what happened next. In the next session of the workshop, the woman said, I have to leave. I can't handle what happened in the break. A guy I went to for help, he abused me.